folks. I'm running a bit of an experiment this week involving my lovely REVV D20 amp head. I love this amp. It's traditional tube amp. You can use it just in a standard way with a cab, but it also happens to have a reactive load box built into it with 2 notes Torpedo cab simulation. You can choose between all sorts of different virtual cabs and mics and reverbs and things. So it's fantastic for recording at home when you need to keep the levels down. Just go straight into an interface, no speaker needed. You can do that live as well. But I've recently invested in a proper dedicated cab for this amp. I'd been using my Fender Blues Junior as a cab, which felt a bit insulting to the Fender amp. So I've bought a proper dedicated speaker. This cab was made by a guy in Scotland. He sells them on eBay. Really nicely made. Made out of pine. And then I put a warehouse guitar speaker ET90 in it, which is what Rev put in their 1x12 cabs. So I knew that would work quite well with the amp. And I only just recently discovered that you can use the reactive load box in the amp and still have it coming through your cab. For some reason I always assumed it was one or the other. But no, you can have it coming through both, which got me thinking in that case I could record using the direct out from the Torpedo and record with a mic on the cab at the same time, and then we kind of have stereo going on. So I thought today I'm going to experiment with what kind of tones I can get, maybe using a few different virtual cabs and mixing it up and stuff like that, and we'll just see what it sounds like. Okay, a quick rundown of the setup first of all. So I'm playing my trusty Charvel guitar. Fishman pickups are in vintage PAF mode, and then that's going into the Line 6 HX effects, which is connected to the amp via the 4-cable method, which means some of the effects can go before it goes into the front of the amp, such as boost, compression, overdrive, and then some of the other effects like reverb and delay are going into the effects loop. So that works great. It's connected to the cab, which I've already told you about, keeping the volume at acceptable kind of home levels here with thinking about neighbours. And then I've got the Torpedo XLR output going into my interface in one channel, and then in the other channel of the Focusrite, which is only a 2-channel interface, I've got my SM57. Now I've chosen that partly obviously it's classic on a guitar amp, but also this is really important. If you have one of these, you're not supposed to put phantom power on to the XLR going to the Rev. And because of my Focusrite, the nature of it is if you turn the phantom power on, it's on for both of the channels. So if I was to use a condenser mic that needed phantom power, I'd have to have the phantom power on, and it would be going to the Rev and potentially doing some damage to the reactive load box. So for that reason I've chosen the SM57, the dynamic mic, which doesn't need phantom power. I suppose a way around that, you could use a separate little mixer perhaps if you wanted to use a condenser mic and have the phantom power on that, and then use an output from the mixer into the Focusrite, or there's various ways you could do that, but this works great for me. And then I've chosen a few virtual cabinets, and we're going to try a few of them as we go, and I'll show you the details. But what I have done is bypassed the power amp section, so that's this pre-post button and on pre, and that doesn't affect what's coming through the cab. That's always going through the preamp and the power amp, but the Torpedo output is getting straight from the preamp section, and then I am modeling a power amp section through the 2 notes Torpedo. Main reason for that is I can have separate control over the volume. So I've got the master volume pretty low here so that I'm not being too loud in the house, whereas on the Torpedo I can have the volume turned up more and start to get a bit more breakup. And it also means I'm getting a bit more variety. It's almost like it's going to be like 2 different amps. So that's the setup. Let's try some tones. so that's a rough idea of some of the tones we're getting so far. What I'm going to do is record the solo for a track that I've been working on, and we'll see how this sits in the mix with other instruments. Maybe try a bit of panning and things like that. One thing I am going to check out is, I think whenever you're recording two sources on the same instrument, it's worth checking that they're not getting out of phase, because you know the source from the mic might be reaching the interface slightly before or after the DI, and if they end up out of phase, we'll end up with certain frequencies cancelling each other out and won't sound as good. So we can check that just visually on the DAW, make sure the waveforms, the peaks and troughs match up, and if they don't, we can drag them in together to correct that. So that is one thing I'm going to check, and yeah, we're going to see if this is something that's worth doing. Okay, here comes the first take. We've got the SM57 on the real cabinet, and that's panned a little bit to the left, and then we've got the REVV 4x12 virtual cabinet from the DI, and that's panned a little bit to the right, and then I've got a reverb plugin on both of them with just a little bit of room reverb. Here we go. Here's take two. Now for the virtual cabinet I'm using the REVV 1x12, which is an ET90 speaker, exactly the same speaker that I have in my real cabinet. So I've panned these hard left and right so that you're getting an entire stereo sound, and I thought I'd try a wet and dry approach. So I've put the reverb on the real mic, real cabinet channel only, and put quite a bit more reverb on that, and then I've kept the virtual cabinet completely dry. And take three now, this is the Fender Blues Deluxe virtual cabinet. I've also used the power amp simulation and cranked the master volume up quite a lot on the simulation so that it breaks up. So this is a bit more of a higher gain kind of sound. I've got still the real cabinet SM57, and I've kept the settings on the amp completely the same for all three of these takes. We've got reverb on just the virtual cabinet this time, and a bit of tube EQ plugin from Logic, and no panning at all. Everything's dead center here so that they completely blend into one another. Alright, so I think there's some really cool tones all around, really. I'll leave you to make your own conclusions about what sounds best. I hope you found that vaguely interesting. Give us a thumbs up if you did, and subscribe if you don't already. That track, if you enjoyed it, is going to be released on my YouTube channel at some point soon. Hopefully even a live video with the musicians that are on it as well. So watch out for that. And I'm a guitarist, not a recording engineer. So if you've got any suggestions of other stuff I could do with this setup, then leave me a comment. I'm really just kind of getting into the possibilities of it all. But lots of fun. So there we go. See you next time.